Hannah, thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to spend some time with you. I am joined by Hannah Feldman, who started life as a lawyer, pivoted to a banker, and has now been a serial female founder. Hannah, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's been quite a journey, spanning now nearly 25 years of being in the workplace. And I suppose in a nutshell, I describe it as I was a square peg in a round hole for a number of years, always looking for a route to kind of define myself career-wise in my own terms. And it wasn't until I became an entrepreneur about 10 years ago that I finally found a profession, or at least a discipline that was most suited to my multifaceted character of being somebody who knows quite a little about a lot of things, I suppose. And that's how I've been an entrepreneur since 2017.
Brilliant. And in that journey of being an entrepreneur, what's been your greatest success?
Oh, well, there's been a lot of highs and a lot of lows, but in terms of success, I think about when I co-founded my last business, Kidadl, and we were pre-pandemic an app to discover, book, and pay for the best things to do with your kids. And it was going pretty well. We had over 120,000 users. We were enabling people to book things for their kids based on their budget, the kids' ages, interests, and location. Sort of magic that you hear about called product market fit. We hadn't found the formula to scale that business. We were just chugging along, getting new users every day, but monetizing them quite slowly because we made 10, 20% of a booking. It wasn't enough to keep the lights on. And we worried we were going to run out of money and we wouldn't find a solution. And then COVID came along and the whole world changed beyond recognition, in the sense of you couldn't go out, discover and book anything with your kids, let alone yourself. And we had to find a different business model. And we had a few 100,000 left in the bank. I think we raised about 3.5 million in total for the business. And with that money, we managed to pivot from a discovery booking app-based platform into a publishing platform, digital publishing platform for family edutainment. And we grew that audience to about 9 million users a month based on content that parents and children needed, both through the pandemic and beyond, for education and entertainment. And we found a model that was the scalable, viable model and had product market fit. And I always look back and I think about an aeroplane, taking off without all of its wings and its and its kit. It was that kind of experience, growing a global team that fast to build a business. But when you have product market fit and it pulls it out and you've managed to find it, that to me is a great success in any business. And I love that feeling, and I'm absolutely committed to finding it forevermore. It was great.
Brilliant. That sounds brilliant. Well, I think you've obviously taken change and really pivoted. So that is phenomenal. Always in this entrepreneur's journey, as you said, it's highs and lows. Talk a little bit about what, and I hate the word failure, but what your biggest failure was. What was the biggest dip?
I think yeah, exactly. We could talk about a number of them, but in terms of that story, I suppose be careful what you wish for as well, because when you've got this incredible traction and you're getting it from one business model, you just pour everything into that model. So you do more hiring for that model. You do more, we didn't do advertising, but you do more content for that model, and you focus your business plan and your financials more on that model. But like everything, and especially in entrepreneurship, nothing stays the same for long. And I think if I had my time again, I would have looked at other routes to market for the business, not just through the content and the publishing model, because the brand has so many legs to expand. And I think we kind of got a bit late to the table on that because we were focused so much on working the business model that did work, rather than thinking what are the opportunity costs and risks in the future, and how can we mitigate them more fully today. So I suppose my advice on that would be always like, even though things are going fantastically, just make sure you've always got an eye on what might not and what might change, and make sure as the CEO or co-founder or part of the senior team that you have plans therein, which I don't think ours were fully formed enough. But we had to get there quickly when we did.
Thank you. And again, on entrepreneurship journey, entrepreneurs and female founders in particular talk about the best bit of advice they've ever had. What is the best bit of advice you've had?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at you, Susie, because you've given me some incredible advice over the years. And, you know, we've met over 15 years ago, right before I even became an entrepreneur. But at a pivotal point in the last number of months, when I came to a kind of decision that would really be the dawning of the next phase of my life, I remember going to you and just talking it through, woman to woman, but really kind of in the way any founder, female or otherwise, needs those mentors and supporters around her or him. And talking through the kind of just going back to basics and talking through that actually when you're at this pivotal point in life, just grabbing the bull by the horns and working out, asking yourself the question, what's the worst that can happen, and throwing yourself 2 feet in to face the consequences and go on the ride is often the best medicine in that circumstance. And I think it was just the reassurance of talking to somebody that really knew me, but that also had seen it through a million businesses and a million entrepreneurs and had the experience to just say with conviction something that sometimes we all wobble on. And I'm really grateful for that. But it also did change the course of not just that week, but the decisions I made from there, you having my back and somebody really kind of being there for me, but giving me the conviction that was somewhere deep down, but I hadn't articulated it in the same way.
It's interesting. I remember that like it was yesterday. I was at a client in Mornington Crescent. You did me a favor because I actually walked thousands and thousands of steps in that whole conversation. But I think you're right. The power of just having someone to listen, but it's also who's prepared. I'm a northerner and I call a spade a shovel. So you were never going to let me, or I was never going to allow you just for me to say yes. So I do remember that.
And that then speaks to the fact that like, those people in your life that every founder needs, or every actually employee, anyone working needs on their journey, those people in life, the more that you give and, you know, give and receive in that relationship, the more trusted it becomes and the more it helps you in a myriad of different ways. And finding those people that care about you enough to be in your corner, I think is immeasurable. And it's not like a formula where you say, well, I need X and I'll go and find Y. It's actually about real relationships with real people. And I remember we met because I cold called you 15 years ago when I was working at UBS to come and become a client back in the day. And actually that didn't materialize. We just became the, you know, firm friends and allies. And it's human. It's not about anything more than that. But these things make the journey just so much more pleasurable and easier when you've got people in your corner like you are for me.
And I think that's an interesting one though, Hannah. When I talk at a lot of female founder events, having that courage to cold call someone and just have that conversation. The worst I would have done was saying, sorry, Hannah, I can't help you. Obviously, that's not who I am. But people need to have that courage, actually, if you're going to succeed.
And you might get a nice cup of tea.
Yeah, and many dog walks on a Saturday morning. So there you go. Exercise as well. That is absolutely brilliant. The other thing I always think is quite interesting to ask female founders is, what is that thing or things that you wish you'd known earlier that would have made a difference in your journey?
I suppose it was the fact that actually entrepreneurship for some is a viable route to bringing up a family if you look at it in a different way. And I only learned that with hindsight, which is that I look back on the last sort of 10 years plus of being an entrepreneur, and I look at my 2 oldest kids who are now 12. I have 3 who are 12 and under. And I think about the fact that I worked the hardest I've ever worked, but I did it on my terms. And I did it in a way that I had real conviction about, where nothing was left, you know, undone. But equally, I was a present mother and a parent in a way some of my friends in more professional environments haven't have had that luxury afforded to them. So I suppose with hindsight, I realized that if your conviction is to do something or be something or channel a certain, you know, vibe in your career, that actually you can always work it out. And I always felt like a square peg in a round hole, as I said at the start. And I suppose I was scared to take the leap because I didn't know a lot of people who looked like me or had the background that I had that were doing these entrepreneurial things. But now with hindsight, I think actually it's opened doors to so many things now at this point in my career. And it gave me flexibility through the early years of raising my children, which a corporate career wouldn't have done. So I suppose the abiding lesson is, you know, if you find something that gives you flow and makes you feel like you can pursue it at any point in your working life and don't be scared to do it. Notwithstanding that, the entrepreneurial path has huge, huge ups and downs in terms of pressure, in terms of finances, in terms of mental health. There's so much more to it. I don't want to sound blasé about the other things that come with it, but it is a decision that for women can work out in the terms that I've just described. And it's something that I have loved, and I can't imagine being privileged enough, like the privilege I've had to be able to do this. I feel very grateful for, but I also, it gives me energy still every day, going out, solving problems, making things happen, and getting out and kind of innovating. I absolutely love it. And it is a privilege, because I definitely had a number of years where that wasn't part of my day to day. And I kind of knew something was missing, but I didn't know what until I gave it a try. So I suppose that's my learning. And another thing I read yesterday, which is kind of linked, but it's like your diet isn't just your food you eat and the exercise you then do. It's actually what you feed yourself with around you. And that's the stimulation of work and the stimulation of friends and the stimulation of family. And so if you feel like mentally starved through your work, then you need to change your diet by changing the inputs. And if that's, you want to be more entrepreneurial, be more entrepreneurial. If that's, you want to travel more, travel more. But we forget the impact these things have. And actually, that's been quite an awakening for me when I think about it philosophically.
Hannah, thank you. And if I think about some of the journey you and I have been on together with those challenges, I think you touched on it, and I think it's for another session. Just talking about the funding and raising funds, I think was probably, you know, one of those downs rather than ups when it was all sorted. But yeah, one of those tough challenges, which I think all founders find, but I know in particular female founders is one of those things they find difficult. But Hannah, thank you very much. Really interesting. Lots of tips and lots of thoughts for the people that will be listening. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was fantastic.